my song. Let's sing it. It's gonna be fucking awesome. Come on, it's gonna be fucking awesome. You know the words. It's gonna be fucking awesome. That's it, sing. It's gonna be fucking awesome. Yeah!
Hey, everybody. It's me, Jesse Blaze Snider, the Coolest Geek Alive. How are you, my fellow Coolest Geeks? Care Bear stare out there to everybody who needs one, and to everybody who doesn't, you got one too. Anyway, we are here today to talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, great things. Why is it that DEI is not being viewed that way? I think there's a lot of liberal people out there who don't exactly understand the reaction that has, been had by a lot of people. I think most of those people are not deeply into anything. And if you stay with me for a second, there are some people that care about things very deeply, and then there are other people that don't. And I think most of the people who don't get why the diversity, equity, inclusion, as it's been rolled out in entertainment, has gone over well with the audience. So I want to talk to you a little bit about hiring in general. So I'm 42. I work in a lot of different fields in entertainment, but the main one we can just focus on right now is comic books. I am a huge fan of the comic book medium, and there are some incredible people working in the medium. There, at the time when I was coming up and reading and thinking about having a career, there was a number of writers that, well, I'll say I am a fan who followed writers. I looked for people who I thought were very consistently good at writing comic books. Everywhere they went, something good was happening. So I would be paying attention. And there were people that I saw that were ready, that were amazing, that were ready for greatness, but they weren't given opportunities the same way other people were. And I kind of wondered for years, why is this? Why aren't these people getting jobs? And I used to talk about how there was sort of a lot of different personality traits that were important for getting a job in the first place. And that the most important part of it is not talent. And here's one of the main things. Most managers and higher-ups aren't talents. A lot of them are wannabes. Some of them are genuinely talented people who could do what you're doing. And sort of the best boss is somebody who on some level could do what you're doing or knows well enough to get out of the way and let you do what you do. So most managers, they don't know what talent looks like. They don't trust their tastes because they learn not to. Because the people who trust their tastes, if your taste pans out, success, great. If it doesn't, there's no one to blame but you. Now, what most managers and editors or whoever, what most of them are doing are following the safest paths imaginable. Because if that safe path doesn't turn out, they get to say, oh, well, there was a thing going on. I did a vampire book for DC Comics a bunch of years ago. And the thinking behind this vampire book was completely, dunderheaded, silly. Vampire novels are doing really well right now. Twilight's a real big success. Let's do a vampire romance comic. We've got a story that takes place in hell right now, and there are vampires there. So let's have a romance of this guy coming out of hell. It's a vampire romance. And I made everything up for them after that. It's called Dead Romeo. And initially I was trying to save their problems. I tied it into the DC universe to make it something that the audience would find to be organic and interesting. But they didn't like any of those organic and interesting things, and ultimately they made me make it this standalone, vampire romance, whatever situation, and it was poorer for it. That sort of inorganic thinking, like, oh, this is successful, so let's try this. That's very rampant in all industry, everywhere. That's rampant on Earth. It's why so often they say, like, there's only one way to get into the comic book industry or any industry, and once you find it, they board it up so nobody can use it. The truth is, once somebody finds an entryway, other people try to do the exact same entryway, and then that entryway gets all clogged up with the other people who tried to do the same thing. But when it comes to getting work in comics, talent is, like, unfortunately, the least of your concerns. It's about being able to sell yourself, being able to pitch, being a drinking buddy. I was straight edge my whole life. At 28, I started recreationally drinking, and I still drink a little socially, just because I could tell that it was sort of bothering people that I didn't drink, and it was like separating me from these editors who I wanted to work with. So, going back a second to, there's all these great writers and they're not getting work. What's going on? Well, those great writers weren't so great at selling themselves in the ways that were necessary. Like, if I have an Achilles heel, it was sort of impatience. If you look at my resume, you'll see I've worked for every company under the sun. But it was just like things would just drag on. And years. It would drag on for years, kind of thing, without like really any progress for me. And I was sort of like waiting in the wings to do things. And then I would just sort of either get other offers, or I would, approach some other people, and like I would have other things going on. And I just ended up kind of bouncing around from situation to situation. When I went to Marvel, my book was delayed. Like, my release of my first thing was delayed, my Deadpool short at Marvel Comics Presents, by a couple years, maybe 3 even, or 2.5, something like that. And then during that time, I got asked to write a Hulk inventory story, which was also delayed 2.5 years. So I had like 2 things at Marvel that I'd been paid to do that were all done, and they were just sitting around. And I was sitting around waiting for them to come out. And during that time, the editors that I were working with, one of them left the company. Another one was, I think, fired, left, whatever. So I went through like 3 editors in a short period of time. And that's an interesting something that's happening. The general culture of like hirings and firings and whatnot, it's definitely a bit volatile. So what does that mean? That means a lot of these people who, let's say, get hired, and in the management positions, I would say there's more racism and whatever else when it comes to management and editorial, like those things in those situations, than there are in the talent positions. However, there are some people who aren't comfortable with, I think, I've heard people say this, that there's more of a cultural difference than there's sort of like racism. There's an extra barrier of making the editor feel like they, and this is like silly to say because it makes these people sound like a little bit racist, but it's just like a human nature kind of thing. Like, can I relate to this person? One of my best friends and editor, Aaron Sparrow, who has always had a really, really diverse cadre of people. Like most of the people who I've used on my books, like if you look at the credits for Blacklight District, so many of his people who are, my people now because they're great. And the diversity amongst his people is amazing. And I really think it's actually just because Aaron is really great at, I'm trying to describe the right way, but just he treats everybody like they're on the same level. Like, I'm thinking more in terms of like people who I've seen who seemed maybe a little poor or maybe a little mentally ill, or, really somebody who there's a decent chance that somebody in society might not treat them with the right respect or equality. And even myself, I would say, not that I wouldn't treat them with like respect, but like maybe I would like baby somebody in a situation like that. And Aaron is just fucking awesome about like, he really just has like no judgment about who he's dealing with, and he deals with everybody in a great equal way, and he's able to get past that wall of like that, like there's any cultural difference between anybody, because I think sometimes we think we turn it into a bigger thing than it needs to be, that there's some sort of barrier between us or whatever. And when you don't think that way, that goes away. So I will say that hiring barrier there is there on some level. On some level, these white guys are not dealing with that seemingly like there's a cultural barrier. But diversity in comics and the voices, the amount of voices, I mean, for females and blacks and Louise Simonson and so many people going way back, it's never been a problem. So it's very, very strange. The landscape of comics in general amongst the talent has always been pretty diverse, and has continued to be. And there are wonderful, talented people that I thought for sure the DEI situation was going to affect positively, because now they were going to be sought after to some degree. To name a couple of these people, like Christopher Priest, who's black. I was reading Chris for years. I had no idea. I'm a huge Black Panther fan, and his run got me into... Well, actually, I was already a big Black Panther fan prior to that. I'd imagined he was cool. I liked that he was a king and all this stuff. But I loved his run on the character, and that really like made him one of my favorite characters of all time. Another one is Marjorie Liu, and I'm going to fuck up what I was reading from Marjorie at the time. I want to say it was like Wolverine Origins. It wasn't a mainline book. There was one or two things that she was doing that were off the beaten path of like the mainline of Marvel stuff, but it was great. She was really great. And more so even than that, like you could tell it was written by a woman in a wonderful way. There was a femininity to, like, I don't know, her prose, and I really enjoyed her work a lot. And I was like, oh, cool, well, Marjorie Liu's in, and then another person who was on my on my early day list of people who were great, that should get more work, that didn't. There was two people that I would always say, Mark Andreyko and Will Pfeiffer. And actually these two people, I tried to do a kind of suite of Chaos books. I was trying to sort of pitch myself to edit a line for Dynamite, but they weren't exactly going for it. I mean, even though they tried to double my page rate before I left the book, but I was very uncomfortable. For those of you who haven't heard me talk about it before, I'm good friends with Brian Polito, and Brian was very uncomfortable with Dynamite having it, and I thought I would do it and it would make him happy that somebody who loved him was on the book, and then it became like sort of weirdness. So I decided to get out of that whole thing. But Mark Andreyko was one of the people who I was trying to have on there, and Will Pfeiffer. They're great. They both of them are incredible writers, and clearly just not the best politickers and not the best at selling themselves. And I'm probably not either. Like look at me dying on the vine. I've managed to sort of I get in the door a lot, but I can't quite get the opportunities that I need to be able to do some of the things that I'd like to do, or I previously wanted to do. Now I don't know how much I really care, but at the time it was a big deal for me, and I saw these guys as incredible writers who deserved more stuff. And Mark happens to be gay, so Mark is another one of those people who I thought, okay, well, Mark's in like Flynn, and he'll be able to get a lot more work. I cannot tell you that there's been this huge flow of mainstream, but I thought it'd be big books, Mark get put on Superman or something. And it hasn't exactly gone that way. And I'm sure to some degree that it hasn't gone that way, probably because Marjorie Liu and Mark and Chris are pitching good ideas, as opposed to things that are ham-fisted and not really exactly well done. And I'm sure that that's a part of it as well. But a part of it comes back to the thing of what was it yesterday? It's not the best talents that get the work. It's the people who are selling themselves the best. And right now, what the managers and the editors are looking for is this diversity, equity, and inclusion thing, right? Now, the only problem really so much with anything like this is like when you're making art, any sort of over focus on something that's unnatural to the thing that you're creating, like, Captain America plus diversity, equity, inclusion, that's a tricky one. You have to write organically from that place, like, and you can do it. You can absolutely do it. Like, there's no reason why this Captain America movie wasn't good. Like, how satisfying would it have been for Sam Wilson to just be fighting freaking Hydra, and them like dealing with a colored boy or whatever, like that bullshit. It's just such a simple bit, and we, as an audience, I think we would have been like, yeah, fuck those guys. There are ways to approach these things that an audience would really like. Famously, the X-Men are the poster children for diversity, equity, and inclusion, and it's so great. It's funny. I should say it's not so great. It's so funny because a lot of people want to sort of like argue DEI on their behalf, as so many things have like changed in the way that it's been approached. I can tell you in the comics, especially, the writers and the artists are constantly, even when there were major barriers to getting black characters or ethnic minorities, females, whatever, into book, they were figuring out ways to get these characters in and to try to make these pet characters play. And, really the heart and soul of this whole industry and the books that are popular, things like the X-Men, amongst all of comicdom, the X-Men resonate. And what are the X-Men? For those of you who don't really know too well of the X-Men were around the main 5 characters, Cyclops and Jean Grey and Iceman and Beast and Angel. And they were with Professor X fighting Magneto. But it wasn't a very popular book. It did not become popular until Giant Size X-Men came out. And I loved it. It was such a simple damn thing to explain to me as a kid. The concept of Giant Size X-Men was that Professor X had to put together a team to save his original X-Men. And he got together these incredible mutants from all around the world. And Wolverine was from Canada. And Banshee's from Ireland. And Colossus is from Russia. And Nightcrawler's from Germany. And Storm is from Africa. And Thunderbird is a Native American from a tribe in America. And Sunfire is from Japan. What a simple and easy to imagine in all these different people from all these different walks of life, and they all have different powers and coming from different places. Like, it's the best, man. I mean, truly, I think that the X-Men has sort of been recipe for so many people reading it, over the years as children, inspiring so many different TV shows and films and whatnot, from the way it was set up, just with so many of these different people from all these different places. The thing that unifies them is they're mutants, but they're all different. It's really interesting, actually, when you think about it. Like, the X-Men is such a wonderful thing, because it's like, I'm a mutant, you're black, I'm white, but we're both mutants. Like, ha 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 ha. Like, it's such a cool thing, and I guess it's similar when, people are like, oh, we share the same Bible or whatever. There's this wonderful unity message within disunity in the X-Men, and that has been there and been growing, and there's been gay representation in the X-Men with North Star, and they've in recent times they've forced a number of things that I think are really kind of silly mistakes. They made Iceman gay, which is really just, when you go back and you read some old school comic books, it just seems dumb. And I can't say it was like handled in a great way, really. I think they think that they did handle it in a great way, but yeah, I mean, unfortunately, when you start going, all right, we need to turn this character gay. Who wants to do that? A lot of the people who are great at writing, may be suggesting it in a way that you can't go along with because they're trying to make it work. And because they see that, well, to just do that, just willy-nilly, because it is currently a popular idea, we think, to do that or talk about doing that, that is creating this really terrible problem of inorganic art. And inorganic art has been a problem for forever. The problems that we had yesterday with so much of the films that they were making and whatnot, shit that we would call tone deaf or whatever, it's the same deal with the DEI in execution. It's just very tone deaf. And it ends up being sort of more racist and sort of like the way it paints women is just so cardboard. They just all kind of get the same coating a lot of the times. And the way it paints the cultures tends to be even like more one note than ever because now they're trying to capture so many cultures at once. Again, like when you're putting like a simple blanket mandate on something, and this is handed down to your editors and your managers, and they're like, okay, we need more diversity, equity, inclusion, right? And let's say, okay, these white people, they don't have any of these friends or whatever, so they start meeting people. Well, this person's got blue hair, and this person's, and they're trying to get people who talk the talk because this became a big PR thing, and they thought that this was a really big deal, and I'm going to talk about this in just a second. Let me kind of talk about this from the front. What's my note here? So how hiring used to be, the general problems, culture, yeah. Managers aren't talented. Most don't know how to find it. Yeah, there are some. But a lot of them, and there's a problem too, because usually the manager that you're dealing with, they're an underling manager. Underling managers, you have to realize they're hired by the previous manager who probably has a manager himself. And all these managers, they don't like the manager below them being smarter than them. This is a real thing. So sometimes the people on the bottom of the totem pole that you deal with are rather doofusy. Really, like you're like, really? This is like, but like they like this person because they get to order this person around, and but they can be a little lackadaisical and hard to nail down. And again, their taste and their street smarts and so many different things, they might not get that something's good or something's bad. I mean, if you're somebody like me who's like delved deep into, oh my God, this was pitched and it was never released, and that was pitched, it was never released. Sometimes you'll find like some creators and they're like, we pitched the X-Men doing such and such. And you're like, what? They said no to that? Like some crazy stuff that as a fan, like that would have been great. That would have went over great. What good timing, like, whatever. And then to hear that they said no, on the other side of it, for me as a professional, I go, okay, yeah, I know why they said no, because they don't really have a lot of vision. That's not so much their thing. They're copying and following for the most part. The people who are allowed to have vision are the people who accidentally get success, or they're the people that have had the most success that they've been able to find that they can use to, promote their book and promote their brand. But I mean, they're using these creators way more than they tend to be sort of not using them. And these creators, like, somebody like Grant Morrison or whatever, who's gotten himself into comics in a deeper way, he's kind of allowed to pick the type of stories he's going to tell or whatever. And sometimes people get ideas for stories and they'll be like, oh, that'd be a great thing for Grant Morrison to tell. And they'll call him up and they'll get him. But for the most part, that's rare. And in most of the people, they like you kind of just being a slave to the grind and doing what they have to say. And, people liking your work, but not liking it so much that you have some sort of power or anything like that. However, there was an interesting change that happened, I want to say 10, 15 years ago. And with social media, well, first there was all these blogs, and there was people like Warren Ellis, who's not gotten in a lot of trouble for all these blogging at the hemispheres of women and whatnot, who he was perhaps taking advantage of. These these social message boards, they had moderators, and it wasn't exactly the Wild West because you'd be going to them, and then people who were dicks would kind of get shut down pretty quickly. So it was generally a lot of people going, "You're the best. I love you. Let me." And those people, let's say when they got to Twitter and stuff like that, they didn't love that experience. And they tended to be sort of combative against any sort of critiques of their work and conversations about their work and stuff like that was online. So that's part one of this new social media movement. Part two was there was big pressure. I remember Joe Quesada was putting pressure on a good friend of mine who was, probably doesn't matter to say who it is, Paul Jenkins, who is a really great writer at Marvel. And he was being asked to basically be more like Brian Michael Bendis and some of these other characters, writers that they had who were active on social media and were, building an audience. And at the time, there was like this really major shift. And I'll say this, I am a social justice warrior. I was loudly sort of going, this is fucked up, and like, this is crazy. Do you know what we did? Kind of thing for like my life. So, when I started to get to a certain age, maybe around 30, I noticed that other people were like taking up the fight that I had been fighting, like, hard for like 15 years, since I was a teenager. But they weren't really genuine. It was sort of about signaling to people online that they were good. Like, look at me, I'm so good. This post shows you that I'm good. Doesn't this say that I'm good? It wasn't about really doing good or like standing up for good. And like, some of these people it's like, I know that person in real life. I went to school with that person. I've never heard that person fucking say anything like this, like it really became kind of popular on the internet in particular, especially with entertainment people like me, people who were in the business, to be signaling to everybody else like how virtuous they were. Around that time, I stopped doing it because I just felt like it was not genuine and I didn't want to be confused with them. And I just thought, all right, you know what? This fight is being taken up by somebody else. I don't have to do it myself anymore. I can start to let other people do this, and I'll just, I'll focus on important things when they come. One second. So, while I got out of the social justice warrior business, basically every professional that I knew got into it, and they started to get into it online in a very major way, initially for sort of brownie points. But then eventually, as this DEI thing began to get pushed in a much bigger way and the audience started to push back against it, there was a time when Marvel did like a whole flip over of a whole bunch of things all at once. And that was kind of the beginning of the audience going, we don't really like this. Prior to that, they were trying to push Captain Marvel really hard. She was Miss Marvel. They were switching her to Captain Marvel. I read like all those books because I really like Miss Marvel and Captain Marvel. And they never quite clicked. They weren't great. They weren't bad, but they weren't great. And they never really like told a story that was sort of worthy of adapting, and it never really told a story that added anything new to her mythology in any meaningful way. And at the same time, they were introducing her sidekick as Miss Marvel, who was the Kamala Khan character, who is, an early adjustment character over here, for Marvel. So the audience online started sort of to respond to this, and a lot of these creators who had previously been protected by blogs, they didn't like all this negativity, especially negativity that came from ideas that they didn't even propagate. Because remember, I get the main idea about vampire romance. That's not Jesse going, oh, I'd love to write a vampire romance for DC. No, I wouldn't. wasn't my fucking dream job come true there. I did a Batman story for them to like audition that was great. And like it still hasn't come out. It's buried in the vaults at DC somewhere. But you know, that wasn't my fucking pick. That's not what I would have done. That was what they wanted to do. And you know, all right, let's turn so and so gay, or blah, 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 you know, that's what editorial wants to do. You know, but it probably comes down to somebody like Brian Michael Bendis of like, they want to turn somebody gay. What do you think? You know, like, and then Brian Michael Bendis starts looking around going, who do we make gay? Like, I mean, what an unenviable task that is. If somebody goes, all right, we got to make one of the original X-Men gay. Like, you do it. It's really, I just find it hysterical because, I mean, you can't win that situation, really. I like, perhaps there is a way. I'm not so sure. The taking a character that's been around for a very, very, very long time and adding the fact that they're gay to the situation, oh my God, it's not great. Like, especially, they did it with Alan Scott at DC. Alan Scott's the original old school, oh shucks, good guy, Green Lantern. Okay? And dude, in like I didn't like read this whole series. I kind of like read the one like well, I kind of looked through a couple of the issues, I guess, but I couldn't believe it because like they had this whole thing with him like with the president and like basically he's gay and like there's like all this secret shit going. Like, here's the problem with a character like Alan Scott being gay. He has a wife. So he's a closeted gay who was ultimately hurting somebody by not coming out and being true, you know, honest. Like, you know, that's not cool. He's a hero. Like, he's a true blue hero. And now, just by making him gay, you put him in this fundamentally morally questionable situation just right from the jump. And then they put him in more questionable moral situations beyond that. It was really like, and it's like what you do in the privacy of your own home and like, you know, with people that you love and like, just like fucking, you know, more power to you. This situation with him maybe having sex with the president while he's married and in the closet to a lady who genuinely loves him. And like, so it's like you really like so much more storytelling has to be done in order to somehow fucking exonerate Alan Scott from a situation like that. You know, or in the situation of the Bobby Drake Iceman. This man has been speaking some serious fucking straight guy game for his entire life. The shorthand for this character was like horny teenager. Like that was like how he was written always and forever, generally. And now basically what you have to say is you have to say, oh, well, he's been living a lie his entire life. He's been overcompensating and he's been telling all these other people that he's like, that's the gay character that you just created. And now you're probably not going to write him like that. And like that's like insulting to the gay community. Like, and that's a difficult thing. As soon as this DEI thing came on, what also happened was a bulletproof glass went around all the women. A bulletproof glass went around all of the minorities. We already have trouble when the woman is the lead, putting her through the same paces that a man goes through. And it's really sexist. You know, when it's a man, we'll fucking kick the shit out of this guy because it doesn't mean that he's just a fucking ant and we'll squish him any different way you want it. There's a woman, all of a sudden, oh, there's like this extra empathy. She makes babies and stuff. Oh, it's a woman. Oh, shut the fuck up. It's a narrative. It's a story. You have to put the women and you have to put the minorities. You have to put all the babies and you have to put them through the hard stuff. If the audience goes through that with them, the audience is there with them and the audience will love them and the audience will care about them. If you don't put them through these paces, you'll get the situation that you had with Rey in the Star Wars films. And granted, there's a lot more things going on there, which we'll get to in a second. But, you know, really the largest problem with Rey, and it's hard to deny, is just she's kind of great at everything from the get-go. Like, you know, without much struggle. And you know, there's the thing of the Mary Sue gets put upon the thing, you know, and then other people will argue that, oh, Luke Skywalker's a Mary Sue. Look, Luke Skywalker went over. We wouldn't be sitting here if Rey went over. Okay, And I mean, like seriously, like that's like that ship has sailed. Ray did not go over. My two daughters, I fucking gave that to them in the best possible light, and they did not go for that shit. And, we'll talk about that in a minute, too, like, about what happens when you try to cater to different audiences than the audience that you have. The audience that you have loves what you're doing. If you do it really wonderfully, all the other audiences are going to want to check it out, too. So it's not about changing your audience. It's just about doing what your audience loves really well, because that audience will then go, you gotta see it. And that's what you want. That's what we used to have. We had lots of, millions of people around the world bringing people to Star Wars because they were such big fans. And, and like just really turning them on to the books and the extended universe and doing all this shit because they were so passionate about it. Would you say that passion still exists for Star Wars? I don't feel it. The audience that the Marvel Comics creators were courting on social media were not comic book buyers. Most comic book people aren't the biggest social butterflies and whatnot. That's not necessarily the place where we're most comfortable. When creators started to go to these platforms, a lot of fans started to make accounts so that they could go interact with these creators. A lot of those interactions, and I've seen so many, they're really not good. If the creative people had a proper perspective on what has been going on, and weren't sort of like led by the media to create a lot of phantoms and just blanket accuse lots of people and blanket block people, they would see that they have been kind of tyrannical in their handling of a lot of this stuff with the creative marketplace. They have been very self-righteous, basically because they have been put in a position of defending work that has been assigned to them. And that is really kind of the thing here that makes it difficult for a lot of these creators to talk about this shit in a more candid way. So many people who aren't getting work, they're so nervous not to talk about it. I kind of shut up and tried to not talk about a lot of things for a long time because I had so many friends that I just didn't want to lose all my friends to stupid politics, even though I really disagreed with a lot of what was being said and how things were being handled, and but it was just like I didn't want to be bothered. I didn't want to be bothered by this conversation the way it's being had. It's so ugly. Now I'm like, fuck it. I'm just gonna chat, and I've been doing this for a while on this podcast. Now we're going here. I think this is maybe going into our second year or something. I've certainly am at the point where I'm not holding back, anything, and having these nuanced conversations about the way all of this stuff is going is really important. So they're going after a new audience. This new audience isn't really interested. And by that, let me say, like when they post some super woke, for lack of a better word, headline about, okay, we're going to make Superman's son gay or whatever. And there's this outpouring of excited people. Okay. Those excited people are excited that the landscape of the universe is being changed in a way that suits them. But they are not, for the most part, Superman readers, Superman buyers. They're not the core audience. The audience that is celebrating your press release and the audience that you would want to buy this book, you want to sell this book to because they're the ones who are going to go to a store and get it. They're two different people. But there was this moment where comic books were trying to cross over. And there's a whole bunch of things with this crossover. There's a societal thing. Comic books have always been seen as like kids type of shit. There's a lot of writers and comic book artists that are they have a chip on their shoulder about people in their lives, I guess, talking to them, treating them like, oh, you make comic books. Like they're like sort of mentally challenged because, you make kids stuff. Comic books, as anybody who reads or has any fucking brains knows, is really much more profound than that. I mean, it's an incredible art form, and some really amazing work goes on in the field all the time, and it should be respected much more than it is. But it doesn't get that respect a lot of times in a lot of worlds, and there's a lot of people in comics who feel sort of disrespected, and at the same time, they feel like their audience is disrespected. But to a certain degree, the creative people who feel like a little bit above the audience, they want to go move over to the group that is the more respected audience, which is like the TV audience and the Hollywood audience. Side note, I hate that group of people. I mean, like, I watch movies and stuff. I like that stuff. But, like, I never wanted to work in the field because I could tell that, like, I didn't love those people. I like craftspeople. I like comic book artists. I like comic book writers. Most of them tend to be a little bit more humble, a little bit more interesting. Most of them are going into comics because they don't think they're good enough or handsome enough or whatever the fuck it might be to go to Hollywood. I didn't not go to Hollywood because I didn't think I was good enough to go to Hollywood. I went to comics because I did not go to, I went to comics because I loved, really I went to comics because that was what I read the most. And my dad had said it because I started to try to write it like a novel when I was younger, and I got kind of stuck. And he said, they say that you should write what you read. And I was getting more and more into comics at the time, and I really was enjoying the art form and so many different things. And I started thinking about that, and quickly that became, what I wanted to do. And I liked it because it was not so superficial. Like I was thinking novels because I was like, but I always thought of that as kind of snooty as well. And I think that is true. When you go into college and you see the division of people in the world, there's people who do things that other people think are childish. There are people who do things that other people think are meaningless. Some people think working in the music industry or the film industry is mostly meaningless. That's not something that they deal with a lot. There's people who work in novels and poetry and fine arts, and they've got their nose up in the air, and they're dealing with these sort of high society people because that's what they think they're supposed to be doing. And and there are these different tiers of this society, and the low tier is us nerds, us geeks, us people who love fucking He-Man and the superheroes and all this shit, or at least they like to look down at us. It's all bullshit. And very much me being a member of the geek culture was like, that's bullshit. Like anybody who says that about me, they're wrong. And here I am, and I'm a member. And there's plenty of other people who represent things that break that mold. We have so many brilliant people working in the geek culture world. However, a lot of the people working in the geek culture world, they are really intimidated and insecure about this Hollywood thing. And they did pick comics maybe kind of for the wrong reasons because they were insecure and they'd like to be in Hollywood. But I don't know. I could write comic books, but I don't know about writing the movies, and they're nervous about this shit. And on some level, this whole big DEI move and this virtue signaling entertainment industry that started to come up, this virtue signaling entertainment industry, it's my son trying to call me, they clung to it because it made them look good basically with their Hollywood friends. And that is just, I'm sorry to say, unfortunate, because it's just like all of this following and whatnot. It's a lot of ego-based stuff. The comic book world was in like a game to be just as liberal, if not more so, and just as transformative. We're going to change the whole world. And it seemed like it was a good idea that had a lot of support. We know now that there are literally algorithms that have been written that went out of their way to make so many of these accounts feel like they had more support for things than they really did, and that there's a lot of bot accounts and things that have been written to make it seem like there's been more support for things than there really are. Whatever the situation is, they were believing that, like, look at all the energy, look at all the clicks, look at all of the likes and impressions that we're getting from this announcement about turning this character gay or relaunching this as he's a black character now. Each one of those relaunches, it was a bigger deal because it would be picked up by all the different press heads and blah, 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 blah. So it seemed like a really good way to approach things. This is what they thought. But they were really undermining the audience. And at the same time, they had a very purposeful idea that they didn't want the audience that they had. That the audience they had was a bunch of aging and ready-to-die white guys. And they needed a contemporary audience. But their idea about getting this contemporary audience often left not very much to be desired, left the fucking old audience in the dust, caring less and less about the thing with each passing year. I mean, and this is like for like every fucking brand under the sun. They've all been such terrible stewards of this stuff, largely fueled by having to now manage this all through the lens of diversity, equity, inclusion, whilst hiring people who are loudmouths in philosophy, but very fucking short in how many books on writing they've read. And that's the truth. You know, most of the people who are writing your books and producing this, even getting hired as actors and actresses, they're ideologues. They're people who, think in lockstep with a lot of really extreme kind of liberalism that not everybody shares. And they, are in like almost like a contest with one another to like show each other how fucking liberal they are. It's crazy. But like it's all wind. It's like it's nothing important. I just like, and we'll connect it to this charity, and then we could say it's for charity, and 5% goes to that charity, but mostly all of it goes to me. It's just a lot of like looking good and making people feel good, but doing nothing. And this has made everybody feel really nice and feel like they're doing something and feel like they're transforming the world, through Obama and so many of these things. And then with the weaponization of Trump and, Trump, he's Hitler. We got to stop Hitler. And, I'm pretty positive, guys, he's not Hitler. I'm pretty positive we're not in a Holocaust. I'm technically Ashkenazi Jew by blood. I promise you, I will fight for all of us if that happens to be the case. But I don't believe it's quite that. I think the situation is just what it's always been. And the conversation has just gotten uglier and uglier. And the two sides have been really fired up, especially the one side, which is being fed by the apparatus. The machine is telling you, yes, come on, we've got to do the right things. And these are the right things to do. Get on the right side of history before it's too late. And, and a lot of people, they're just kind of hopping to trying to do that, thinking that they're doing exactly the right thing by pressing this button very hard, because it's not so much like taking this side is a problem, it's the taking this side and going, and all others may they die slowly and painfully, which is what you see a lot of people starting to feel comfortable saying. I mean, it's crazy. What some of the people feel comfortable saying, and at the least of which people are just writing off their friends and their family, and it's a terrible thing to do. I see people all the time like they want to like call me a racist or something because I try to give a balance to the conversation that they're having, and they go, I've seen MAGA people say that, and I'm like, well, maybe MAGA people aren't always wrong. I'm not MAGA, I'm centrist, and I'm just seeing what you're saying, and I'm going, I don't really think that that's accurate. But people have become very partisan within this whole machine. So the diversity, equity, inclusion thing, it's actually fed the anger and the vitriol towards the audience, especially because I guess they haven't really understood why has the audience got a problem with diversity, equity, inclusion? It's because it's not being executed in a very natural way, and the people who are being hired to do it are not the natural picks for the job. They're the natural picks for diversity, equity, inclusion specifically, but not specifically for great storytelling and great writing. Ryan Reynolds, Blake Lively, Kathleen Kennedy, and husband Frank Marshall. Okay, so Kathleen Kennedy is And look, I don't know Kathy, and I suspect that Kathy has been in a living hell. She was the assistant to George Lucas and Steven Spielberg. She married George Marshall, I think his name is, Frank Marshall, who's a famous filmmaker, director. And she has probably eaten more shit than anybody in Hollywood. The idea that she might have a grudge against George Lucas and Steven Spielberg is not far-fetched. There is some clips of of Steven and George talking about her that are going around the internet, that have been going around the internet for decades now, that are, or a decade now, I should say, that are damning and embarrassing. Clips talking about how basically she wasn't even good at getting the coffee right, and that all of her suggestions were terrible. I mean, there's not a lot of them talking about Kathy, and what they do say is terrible. Terrible. These upper echelons of this business world are handled in secret meetings by secret societies and people doing the things that this person likes and that person likes so that they get approved by this one and that one. Kathy Kennedy has been here and in this position and brought in as the diversity, equity, and inclusion thing kicked off. I believe, she was given a mandate to do what she has done, but was just not capable of executing it very well. There are plenty of not so talented people in the world who have powerful friends and powerful husbands and powerful whatever. That is largely the way the entertainment industry has worked. I have only been able to do as much as I've been able to do in the entertainment industry, basically because I'm not willing to do some of the things that some of these other people are willing to do. And there are opportunities for those who are willing to play a little bit differently. And, sometimes there are people who get into, and I've seen this, get into relationships with talented people so that they can have control, so that they can get acting roles, so that they can get producing jobs. There's so much relationships of, convenience in Hollywood. It's really sad. And you see it all the time. And Kathleen Kennedy, from what you can tell of the thing, I'm sure she's doing lots of things behind the scenes that are important to movies getting made. But she is not a creative. And she was put into a very important position to govern these things. These Star Wars films. Well, the Lucasfilm in general. So it's not just Star Wars. It's Star Wars, it's Willow, and it's Indiana Jones. Famously, the Willow TV series they made was so terrible that they took it down from Disney Plus and just took it as a tax write-off. That's how bad that was. The last Indiana Jones did not go well. And I'm sure you have a pretty good idea that Star Wars has largely not gone very well. We'll talk about some of this in a second. So I mentioned Ryan Reynolds and Blake Lively just because, obviously Blake is a bit of a snake. And it seems like maybe even she kind of maybe even stole him away from her previous relationship with Scarlett Johansson. And the quagmire that Ryan Reynolds is now in sort of being in cahoots with her. All of these people look bad for being in relation to Kathleen Kennedy. But, when your husband's Frank Marshall and, you've got your resume underneath you, it's not as a creative resume. You can go and you can say basically anything you want. Oh, yes, I've worked with this. Oh, yes, I was involved in some of that creative stuff. Like you can say those things in the meetings. It's very funny. I mean, like people, like lots of rock stars, I mean, all across the world love to make fun of the Ultimate Jam Night because of how many musicians would play who would claim to be from a band of some notoriety. And they'd be like, I've been in this band for such and such years. That guy's never played with us. I don't know who the fuck that is. And like, there's a lot of sketchy credits and sketchy things. Like this whole world that we've been living in, as we've gotten into this diversity, equity, inclusion, it's been very slippery slope of like people being more superficial because we're looking to cast people based on this trait or that trait. And I've come out recently officially. I'm non-binary. I've always been non-binary, even though it wasn't like the term I would use for it, and I didn't really talk about it a lot. And I'm only talking about it now because I can't get hired because I'm non-binary, and I thought that was bullshit. And I didn't want to get jobs because I was fucking non-binary. I want to get jobs because I'm a great writer. But of course, I didn't. Well, I still have been working and I've gotten jobs because I'm a great writer. But I mean, in the mainstream, in the areas that we're really looking to push this DEI thing, they're not looking for great writers. They're looking for great writers who happen to be black, great writers who happen to be female, great writers who happen to be gay. They're not looking for great writers who happen to be white and straight. I'll tell you that much. And I mean, it's happening still, but they're not looking for that. Get it? And yesterday they weren't necessarily looking for these companies. They're idiots. Whatever you give them, whatever they do, they're going to execute it badly. That's why when something like Pixar comes along and it's executed perfectly for fucking a decade or something and everything's great, you're just like, holy shit, who's in charge here? Because most of these people are really not capable of doing such a good job. And most of the really wonderful editors and whatnot, they literally, like Aaron Sparrow, case in point, he had so many problems at fucking Boom Studios because of the big egos over there. Aaron was responsible for a lot of major success for them. He was the one who was begging to let them do Darkwing Duck and Disney Afternoon Comics, which was a very big success for them. And they not only did they not want to give him credit, by the end of it, they were trying to blame all the problems on him. He had such good relationships with Disney that it didn't matter that they tried to do that. And Disney ended up hiring him, or he ended up working with Disney just a few months later after leaving Boom. But it was very interesting to me. I'm like, here we go. I finally get an editor who really gets it, who's really worth his weight in gold. He's a good writer himself, but he knows, to get out of the way of his people, help in the right ways. And he has good foundational ideas about what should be done and what might be good to be done. And, and this guy should just be rising through the ranks. He should be the freaking editor-in-chief at Boom Studios if Ross Ritchie, who was running the things at the time, was smart. But no, he viewed Aaron as like some sort of rival to him. And this is the problem. It's just when you're dealing with all of these different egos and all these different rivalries. And then once you have something like diversity, equity, and inclusion and human resources and now rivalries, and I can get that person fired and we can get that person fired. Fuck it, dude. Ego has been making this whole show run wild. And who is left at these companies in the entertainment positions? The people with the big egos, or the people who are okay at walking on eggshells around these people with the big egos. It's a real change that's gone on over there because of what they've been looking for. So they've created a totally crazy culture. Now, the force is female, defending the part of the audience that instinctively knew this was a problem. Okay, so when Kathleen Kennedy came out and she's at the thing and the force is female, and I know a lot of people want to just be like, oh, sexist to the people who immediately groaned when this happened. But look, man, we have a psychic populace. And there are people out there in the population who trust themselves. And those who do are able to recognize simple, inorganic creation of art. And if they love something, they want to see the organic genesis from the thing that they love into the next thing that they might possibly love, and not some quantum leap that you have made that isn't connected to the like the Force is female. Just case in point. There's some sort of like insult right there that like it hasn't been. Even though the main character of the films, one of them, is a spunky tomboy princess who gives as good as she gets and fucking earns it, and the audience loves, and like, I mean, she's one of the main characters. I mean, she's a sex symbol, and I mean, it's like, I know some people are like, oh, Carrie Ann, but I mean, like, I don't know if she's some next level fucking supermodel that we should be like, oh, she's a sex symbol. She's a sex symbol because we like her so much. So to this audience, you say the Force is female. Let's admit, right? Well, Jesse, there hasn't been a lot of girls in the thing. Okay, yeah, sure. They did try to get some in some of the prequels and stuff like that. And there has been a little bit, but sure, But by saying the Force is female in like this big way, it sort of baits the audience subtly and suggests that like it wasn't that yesterday. That the Jedi out there who have daughters aren't trying to have lightsaber battles with our daughters, and that like we're not trying to teach them how to be Jedi too. Like there's some assumption in some things here. Now, when you see something like that, there's a part of the audience who's savvy who goes, well, this is some sort of mandate that's been put throughout the film that is going to poison the natural continuation of George Lucas's 6-film series that I have been enjoying up to that point. And they are not wrong. Honestly, they were the people who called it way early. They went, I've seen this before. I saw them trying to take Miss Marvel and turn her into Captain Marvel, and then try to introduce us into Kamala Khan, who's the new Miss Marvel. And they were just pushing it because it was like the thing to do at the time, and all the fingerprints of this is the thing to do at the time, and not this is a natural thing to do that comes from somebody's heart and matters in this way or that way, which is the way art's supposed to be. The genesis of art should be. So let me just say, like that initial reaction, it's easy to kind of be like, well, look at these people. Their first reaction, their gut reaction to something like the Force is female, they were like, rah, blah, blah. And I would say that was relatively limited too. I think most people were okay with that. Like, oh, cool. Well, just as long as they do a good job with it. But then the voice started getting louder. And then they kept that whole narrative going. This is a sexist and racist group of people who are not, fans for all the wrong reasons. But there were reasons to be skeptical about Kathleen Kennedy's Star Wars from the very beginning. There were signs that she didn't really know anything about the extended universe and what had been done and approved and overseen by George Lucas already. They announced that they weren't going to be doing the extended universe. They relaunch with J.J. Abrams and make a narrative that largely has nothing to do with anything from the previous movies. I mean, granted, by the end of it, they make Rey a Palpatine, but Finn and the other guy, the pilot, and like all the there's really very they missed the opportunity for Luke and Leia and Harrison Ford's character Han Solo to be in the same scene together. They kill Harrison Ford's character, and they basically rehash the plot of A New Hope, and so many people went, all right, well, it's cool. It looked good. It felt like Star Wars. J.J. Abrams is good at casting. But a lot of people, from the jump, they were like, they got rid of the EU. They're not paying attention. They're not doing this right. If I was somebody who was a fan of the EU, because I've never really read any of those things, but I've had plenty of it recommended to me. I've got plenty of friends who are, and they were, devastated. Like that was like the first knock against things. So a choice is made to not honor the building blocks for future stories with Mara Jade, who I think is Luke Skywalker's wife. Which they could have done Mara Jade and, put things like around her, put the story around her shoulders to some degree or whatever, made her the main character. Like there's some interesting things that they could have done that I would have tried to have them do if they wanted the Force to be female, if they wanted this, just to make sure that there was more diversity and inclusion, whatever. Like it could have been done and had everything be great. But unfortunately, when the focus moved to the Force being female and all these things, the notes that are going to J.J. Abrams and the notes that are going to the other writers and the pitches that are being brought into them, they start changing because they start trying to focus myopically on some simple bits of this DEI and not always, and I would say by not always, actually most of the time, unfortunately, aren't able to organically connect it into the thing that everybody was already enjoying. So it's like, hey, we're enjoying that. Okay, well, we're going to add more to it, but we're going to add something that's inorganic and doesn't really connect to the thing that you were previously enjoying. Oh, I'm probably not going to like that. Oh, no? Yeah, you're probably not going to like that. Unnatural genesis of ideas. What happens? It's inorganic. So, yeah, we just talked about that. Doing what they want, not having to answer to past stories. So a big thing, and and this is really like the big thing, and to get into and finish this whole conversation about Kathy Kennedy as a really good example. The fans, we know so well, and pleasing the fans is difficult because it seems like somebody always has something to say. But you can please the fans in general. You can mostly please the fans. You can make people generally fucking happy. And you should never stop trying to do that. But Hollywood's answer to the fan situation a little while back was, all right, fuck it. We're leaving the fans behind. We're just going to do what we want. Kevin Feige left the Marvel Story Group editor team, the Marvel Brain Trust, which was filled with great editors and writers and whatnot from Marvel, who were overseeing these scripts and making sure that they weren't jumping the shark too far in directions that the fans wouldn't like. When those guys were gone, holy shit, the whole Marvel universe just, bleh, who cares anymore? It's really, and it's like that simple because it's a concise bit of this wonderful storytelling that we're holding on to. And then when we get a whole bunch of things that just like dilute all the stuff that we like, well, who wants that? So what have we seen, with Kathy Kennedy? She comes in here and she's very much the poster child for the put a chick in it and make her gay, right? So we got the first film of the series, which just rehashes A New Hope, but we get a lot of our DEI. Now, unfortunately, because Kathy's not a writer, she didn't plan a trilogy. She had a whole bunch of writers come in and pitch her a second part to this trilogy, and most of the people who were responsible writers probably were planning in their own mind how a third part to this trilogy would end. Rian Johnson did no such thing. He came in and he flipped all of the conventions of the first movie, which is probably something that most of the other people who pitched Star Wars to her didn't do. So his meeting and his pitch was probably very surprising. And I suspect that they hired him based on how shocked they were by the choices that he made. And they thought, this will be great. And there are some interesting things in Rian Johnson's movie. There really are. Unfortunately, as a middle chapter to a trilogy, it's not a good. It's bad. It's very bad. A lot of bad things going on there. And boy, did they not stick the landing and do anything positive with any of the things that Rian Johnson put in the second movie, because I think J.J. Abrams was feeling a little rivalry, and he literally reversed everything that had been reversed in the second movie in the third movie. And this is Kathleen Kennedy's fault. This is the system that we're in, the management system. The managers don't know what the fuck they're doing. The managers aren't writers. the best managers who aren't writers know to get the right people and then get out of the way and let them do their job and try to take their advice, but to know the things. The even better than that managers actually know what they're talking about. They've actually read all the extended universe books in Star Wars. They've watched the movies at length. They've tried to ascertain what it is about this property that everybody fucking loves. I remember, I'm not trying to pat myself on the back, but this is what you should be doing. I was doing a panel for Voltron, and I'd never watched Voltron before, but I had to do this. It was a whole thing honoring Voltron. They were very enthusiastic. They had asked, were asking me if I'd be willing to do it, and I said, okay. I said, but I'm gonna get into Voltron. Because, I like the robot, and I've seen it and stuff like that. I know a little bit about it. I've had friends who like Voltron. I said, so let me get into it. And I went and I watched, the pilot movie and a couple different things. But I got into Voltron. And I knew pretty good, what the deal was. To this day, I know about Voltron now. And I like Voltron. And I got into it because I was doing some work on it. And I didn't think that it made any sense for me to go and, pretend to be a fan of Voltron at this fan event with all these people who love Voltron if I didn't love Voltron. And when I went into, figure out my love for Voltron, it was definitely I'm going to come away with loving Voltron. Not let's see if I like Voltron. I went, people like Voltron. Let me see if I can figure out why. And if that was the pursuit of these producers, of the people who are running the ship, they're running the show on all these things, and they were willing to get the right people and get out of the way for them, things would be a lot better. Now, doing what they want, not having answers to past stories. So the best thing that Kathleen Kennedy did, and kind of the second best thing that came out of it, is Rogue One. I love Rogue One so much. That actually made me love Star Wars. I'm not a big Star Wars fan, but I have a lot of friends who were, and I kind of looked at the Disney situation as an opportunity to get into it. And I went back and I watched some of the cartoons during this time and stuff, and I enjoyed some of those things. And I really enjoyed Rogue One. I thought that movie was excellent, beautiful. So many things I liked about it. And it told a little story that was just a little piece of continuity from A New Hope. And that was a wonderful recipe because there's just really to honor that piece. And it was able to have some diversity, inclusion, and all these things, and, in the right way. Wonderful. Wonderfully handled. Excellent. But then from there, everything just goes downhill. And you have the Solo movie, and you have the TV shows, which they get things right with Mandalorian, but Mandalorian is such a great example because it wasn't what people wanted. That Mandalorian series was essentially you want Boba Fett? Well, that sounds like something that would be difficult to make you happy. So how about instead of Boba Fett, and we don't have to worry about making you happy, we just create a new character that we can do whatever we want with. And then that way, it'll be easier to make you happy. There's been a lot of that going on. A lot of that. And the different TV shows that have come out have all gotten to a point where the audience was really coming to a head in feeling very aggravated that they weren't being listened to, that this diversity, equity, and inclusion, the way it was being executed, was hurting the entertainment. And now it was becoming shorthand for, I'm not going to even see that. When the sequel to the Mad Max movie recently with the blonde L. Taylor Johnson, whatever her name is, people just assumed it was going to be woke garbage. And now this is a choice that the studio made to do this story as opposed to a follow-up to the thing that they had just done, which was so great and the audience loved it and whatnot. So, but it was great. It was executed well. The movie was awesome. Me and my kids saw it opening weekend. It was awesome. But the larger audience by that point in time was like, skip, pass. And Hollywood at this time seemed to be doing a thing where they were like, Oh, yeah, you don't like it. You love it. Fuck you. We're going to double down. We're going to make you like it. There was so many articles and interviews in the press with actors and directors and where they were just like, suck it, fanboy. This is what you get. And so they just kept doubling and tripling down on this. The audience isn't with it, but that's okay. The audience is passé, but they didn't realize the audience wasn't liking that you've abandoned the roots of all the things, and all of the DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion that you're including isn't coming off organically, and you're not creating women who are being given an opportunity to fight their own battles really hard and earn their path in the mythology. You're creating women who are kind of being given things a little bit too easily, and aren't able to have the fucking power that they should by earning the affection of the audience the same way the white straight male characters have been doing it for ages and ages, which is from getting the shit kicked out of you and getting up. There's a movie called Cool Hand Luke where it's like the perfect example. You fall in love with Cool Hand Luke in this simple scene relatively early in the movie where he's just getting the shit kicked out of him and he keeps getting up. And I mean, like, by the fucking 100th time you see this guy get up bleeding, and he's getting the shit kicked out of him, you're just like, you love him. This you look the scene up online. It'll show you everything that I mean about what I'm saying right here. If you have some characters that the diverse, equitable, and included characters that you'd like to use, I promise the best thing to do with them is to make them go through some really hard things. That's how the audience connects with people. That's how the audience goes, yes, give them what they want. Look at what they had to go through to get it. They deserve it. And there is a hesitance to do that, to go all the way with this. And at the same time, they have been beating this drum really hard to try to get to a next level of diversity, equity, inclusion, which sort of crescendoed in. It was interesting. It was like you had Obi-Wan, where his show was taken over by Princess Leia, which was an odd choice because he was supposed to be guarding very specifically Luke. But obviously the mandate was, let's have him Leia. And we got a little girl as the main cast. We want a woman in there. So Obi-Wan's show becomes about this lady. Then the follow-up to that was Ahsoka. Ahsoka's now, okay, we got Lady Jedi show. And people were disappointed in Obi-Wan. Some people liked it. People were disappointed in Ahsoka. Some people liked it. But, there was disappointment. Not anything that got everybody excited. And then when people heard about Acolyte, and I had said, it's done, it's over. Acolyte just seems like a thumb in the eye to this audience who's been going, hey, I feel like you're prioritizing this diversity, equity, inclusion thing over great storytelling. And I no longer have any faith that your storytelling is going to be any good. So, this announcement just happened that Kathy Kennedy is supposed to leave. I don't think she's going anywhere. She may leave eventually, but she is a very shrewd Hollywood person. The Bob Iger has himself in a very difficult situation in this very liberal Hollywood that we live in, because firing her would make him look bad, despite the fact that it is the greatest business decision he would ever make. But he has not been able to make that business decision because of all of the political power and the way she plays the game. This announcement of her leaving was in the press. It's been said that it might be to promote Andor Season 2, which I think is probably pretty likely. I would say, though, Andor Season 2 is probably going to be great. Andor Season 1 was great. Rogue One was great. That is like the few bits of Star Wars that has been awesome. The first 2 seasons of Mandalorian were great, even though we didn't need that shit. And it fell apart by Season 3. And what was it all for? The amount of wins in the plus column for Kathy Kennedy is very small. The rumor had been that she was going to leave on a high note, that she was trying to get a win and to go out on a win. Skeleton Key might have been that win, except nobody saw it. There's a Rey movie in the pipeline. There are so many announcements. There are so many of these things in the pipeline. But this has been, this is the bad part of DEI, because it is also DEI hires, and I'm telling you, Kathleen Kennedy is the DEI hire. Whose dick is she sucking? Frank Marshall's. Probably George Lucas and Steven Spielberg's too, knowing that they're freaking Illuminati entertainment community people who were friends with Stanley Kubrick, who mysteriously died and made a freaking movie about all their shenanigans that they do behind closed doors, eyes wide shut. This lady is she is Hollywood. The amount of movies that have been announced, and this is expert gameplay by Kathleen Kennedy. There have been so many different things that have happened, and then I've watched Iger in the trade. These trade magazines are just articles that come out, are paid to come out, or are organized to come out from behind the scenes by the people who control the industry. So when there's these announcements for these movies that are coming out, like Star Wars, Dawn of the Jedi, or the Lando, or Taika Waititi's Star Wars movie, or Sean Levy's Star Wars movie, a droid story, Star Wars Heir to the Empire, Star Wars New Jedi Order, Tales of the Jedi Season 2, Ahsoka Season 2, Bad Batch Season 3, Outlaws, Star Wars Outlaws, Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic. I mean, like, so many of these things that have been announced aren't ever going to come out. This Rey movie, I have my doubts that it'll ever come out. I don't know what's going to happen. I think that announcement was probably very embarrassing to her, and that she might stay longer just to spite people. I think that she's definitely trying to figure out some way to Hollywood her way out of this situation. But she is the perfect example of, unfortunately, a DEI hire who is somebody who had a lot of equity in the business and was around for a really long time and was given this great position to do something that she did not really have enough talent to execute properly. And she brought in often very talented people, but who were given mandates that weren't really well guided. And if you don't have somebody who is the shepherd for the trilogy, and you've got new teams coming in to make each movie, well, of course your trilogy is going to freaking suffer for that. And when you're ignoring the fact that there's all of this built-in story that's already told, that fans are excited to see told on the big screen and to promote and all that, and you just decide to ignore all that, I mean, this is it. As diversity, equity, inclusion has been going on, there has been people ignoring everything that came before and trying just sort of something new, going about it in a way that just allows to very sore thummy the DEI things. And unfortunately, when you do something that isn't very good, the very obvious DEI choices that have been made get blamed because it's just the easiest thing to point to. And that's what's really been going on over the past couple of years with the audience. The audience has just been blaming the most obvious thing. The elephant in the room is that they're doing this whole DEI thing, and whatever it is, I fucking hate it. And the assumption that means that the audience is fundamentally racist and sexist, and it's wrong. It's really wrong. And even those people who were calling it out from the very beginning, it's wrong. They were just savvy that this was a recipe for disaster. The way this was going to be executed was going to be inorganic. The way this was going to go down wasn't going to be something that we were going to like. I promise you, the people who hated the Force is female, they love the X-Men. And they like fucking Red Sonja and female comic characters and whatnot. They just said, oh, great, make me die. It's become a cliche. It's become a popular thing to say, the Force is female. Oh, gag me with a spoon. This is going to be lame. That is ultimately the reaction that everybody has had. And that reaction has only amplified and amplified and amplified with almost a decade of Kathleen Kennedy releases, or is it more now, for Star Wars. And it's really the truth. She's really like the perfect case study. Anyway, that's all I got for you today. I love you guys. I do a show every Wednesday and Saturday. I do a show where I do picks for film and TV, things that I think are really good. If you haven't checked out the Saturday show, it's usually shorter. There's lots of good recommendations for TV shows and films that I think are really fucking kick-ass and you should check out. Anyway, I love you. If you're not listening to my Esoteric Wisdom show, which I'm now recording every Monday, it's called Everything They Don't Want You to Know, and it's pretty dope. You should check it out. Next episode's on reincarnation. I forgot what the previous episode was on. Prayer and things like that. Anyway, my music show, All Your Favorite Bands Suck is still available. I just have it on hiatus right now as I reformat the show because we got dropped by Spotify. So you can find it everywhere except for Spotify. Anyway, I love you so much, and I hope you will join me again next Wednesday and this coming Saturday for another fucking awesome episode of the Coolest Geek Alive. Love you guys. Peace. You've been listening to Coolest Geek Alive with me, your host, Jesse Blaze Snider. Don't forget to rate, comment, and subscribe for more excellent geek culture content. Thanks for listening.
It's my favorite part. Isn't that heavy? I played that. It's gonna be fucking awesome. Coolest alive. It's gonna be fucking awesome. Stay with your tribe. It's gonna be fucking awesome. Revenge of the Geeks. It's gonna be fucking awesome. Week after weeks. It's gonna be fucking awesome. Laughing with you. It's gonna be fucking awesome. And crying sometimes too. It's gonna be fucking awesome. Spelling it out. It's gonna be fucking awesome. Making you shout. It's gonna be fucking awesome. Talking some shit. It's gonna be fucking awesome. Living your shit. My voice gonna be fucking awesome. Foot in our mouth. It's gonna be fucking awesome. Get in the mouth. It's gonna be fucking awesome. Tell all your friends. It's gonna be fucking awesome. Call right or text. It's gonna be fucking awesome. Raising the bar. It's gonna be fucking awesome. Straight to the stars. It's gonna be fucking awesome. It's starting soon. Straight to the top. Awesome. Passing the moon. It's gonna be fucking awesome. On with the show. It's gonna be fucking awesome. Ready, set, go. It's gonna be fucking awesome. Fucking awesome. It's gonna be fucking awesome. Just wait. You'll see. You'll all see. You'll all see.
The podcast playground.